Lord Archibald Pembroke sits upright in his leather chair, a Webley revolver smoking in his lax fingers. Blood pools beneath the blotter, yet the French windows are bolted, the door locked from within, the key on the rug, no footprints mar the dew-soaked terrace. Upstairs, 5 guests freeze mid-sentence. One drops a crystal glass. It shatters like a second gunshot. Hercule Poirot, summoned for a trivial matter of forgery, closes his green eyes. Chapter 1. The Locked Room. Hercule Poirot arrived precisely 7 minutes later, stepping from a charcoal-grey Daimler that gleamed like wet obsidian under the porte-cochere. The fog clung to his patent leather shoes as he ascended the 3 stone steps, each one exhaling centuries of damp moss. His moustache, waxed to symmetrical perfection, bristled against the November chill. Behind him, Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard huffed, collar turned up, clutching a warrant that had been telephoned through from London at 3:17 a.m. "Suicide, they're saying," Japp muttered, breath pluming. "But the local constable's in over his head. Locked room, no note. Well, there is a note, but it's burnt to cinders. Thought you'd sniff something, Poirot." Poirot's green eyes, bright as absinthe, flicked to the manor's gargoyles. "Sniff? No, mon ami, I observe. And already I observe that the clock in the hall has stopped at 3. Yet the church bell struck after the shot. Someone has been creative with time." The study door, solid English oak, brass lock unscratched, yielded to the key found inside on the Persian rug. Poirot entered first, gloved hands clasped behind his back, Japp lumbering after. The room exhaled brandy, gun oil, and the copper tang of blood. Lord Pembroke sat upright in a crimson leather wingback, facing the hearth. His head lolled slightly left, as though listening to a distant orchestra. A Webley mixed 4-for-service revolver lay in his right hand, barrel angled toward the temple. The entry wound was a neat black circle, no larger than a sixpence. The exit had taken away the top of the skull in a spray that decorated the wall map of the Belgian Congo like abstract art. Blood had pooled beneath the blotter, soaking into the green leather until it resembled a topographical map of hell. The French windows were bolted from within, 2 iron bolts, no play. The transom above showed a single pane repaired with fresh putty, still tacky. No footprints marred the dew-drenched terrace beyond. The gravel path was undisturbed. The room's only other exit, a dumbwaiter to the wine cellar, was sealed with a brass latch, dust undisturbed for decades. Poirot knelt, tweezers poised like a surgeon. Regardez! The bullet entered at 22 degrees downward, yet Lord Pembroke was right-handed. See the callus on his trigger finger, the ink stains on the right forefinger. To achieve this angle, he would need to be a contortionist, or a left-handed man holding the gun to his left, temple. He lifted the revolver by the trigger guard, and observe, the barrel is polished with beeswax. A suicide does not buff his weapon before despair. No, this is theatre. Mrs. Agatha Pembroke, widow, 42, still in midnight blue velvet and pearls, stood in the doorway, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles blanched. Her eyes, the colour of winter steel, were dry. "I heard the shot while pruning the Madame Caroline Testout roses," she said, voice steady as a metronome. "At 7 minutes past 3, the clock had just chimed." Poirot's eyebrow arched. "Pruning roses, madame, at 3 in the morning, in November, and in silk slippers?" He indicated the hem of her gown. Immaculate, no dew, no leaf mould. Colonel Reginald Hawthorne, moustache like a broom, face the texture of old saddle leather, cleared his throat. "Pembroke was in the depths, Poirot. lost half his fortune in 29. Shell shock from the Somme. Man was a walking ledger of regrets. Dr. Evelyn Sinclair, 35, auburn hair pinned severely, stepped forward clutching a black medical bag. His lordship was on digitalis for arrhythmia. A single missed dose could trigger despair. I refilled his prescription yesterday. Her fingers trembled as she opened the bag. An empty brown vial rolled out. Digitalis purpurea, 100 tablets. Poirot's gaze flicked to the decanter on the sideboard. Brandy, half full. He lifted the stopper, inhaled. Amandes amères, bitter almonds, cyanide, peut-être? Yet the autopsy will show no digitalis in the bloodstream. Curious. In the grate, a scrap of vellum curled like a dying moth. Poirot pinched it free with tweezers. Charred edges, but legible. You will pay for Ypres. The handwriting was spidery, frantic. Ypres. Jap scratched his head. Third battle, 17. Pembroke made munitions, contracts. Some say he cut corners. Shells that didn't explode till they were in the breach. Hawthorne's face purpled. My men died because of his shoddy fuses. £40,000 I owe White's, because he wouldn't honour a debt of honour. Poirot turned to the desk. The blotter was askew. Beneath it, a faint indentation in the leather, left-handed writing pressure. He aligned his notebook, shaded with a soft pencil. Words emerged. The game is up, forgive me. But the G in game was misaligned, the crossbar too high. Typed, not written, Poirot murmured. And the ribbon? Fresh. Yet Miss Blackwood, his secretary, uses a Remington with a faulty G. This is from a different machine. The key on the rug was brass, heavy, ornate. Poirot tested it in the door lock. Perfect fit. Then the French windows, too small. The dumbwaiter, rusted shut. The desk drawers, none matched. He held it to the light. A faint scratch on the bow, B17. Safe deposit, Jap suggested. No, this key opens nothing in this room. It is a prop like the beeswax, like the angle of the wound. Someone wishes us to believe in a locked-room suicide. But the room lies. He moved to the mirror above the mantel, an ormolu monstrosity, gilt peeling. A spiderweb crack radiated from the centre, as though struck by a fist. Poirot measured with a silk tape. The fracture aligned perfectly with the transom window's broken pane. A fishing line, monofilament nearly invisible, looped through the putty repair, knotted to a brass curtain ring. Someone stood outside, Poirot said softly, pulled the trigger, then reeled the gun inside. But the mirror? Ah, it showed the killer their own face. A moment of vanity, n'est-ce pas? In the corner, a HMV gramophone, mahogany cabinet, brass horn. The record, Elgar's Enigma Variations, sat askew on the turntable. Poirot wound the crank. The needle dropped. Nimrod swelled, majestic, then a click. The music stopped. A second groove, hidden beneath the label, began to play. A child's voice, tinny, terrified, "Daddy, don't leave me, please!" The room froze. Mrs. Pembroke's composure cracked. A single tear tracked her cheek. Poirot lifted the record. Beneath the label, Lavinia, aged 8, 1917. Miss Lavinia Blackwood, Pembroke's secretary, was 28. This recording was 11 years old. Jap whistled. Blackmail. Or love, Poirot said. The two are often indistinguishable. Poirot returned to the body. With delicate fingers, he lifted Pembroke's right hand. The palm was pristine, no powder burns. But the left hand, hidden beneath the blotter, bore a faint smudge of vermilion oil paint. Curious, Poirot said. Lord Pembroke was no artist. Yet Mr. Felix Marlowe, our art dealer guest, uses vermilion exclusively. And observe the putty on the window. It is fresh, applied within the hour. Colonel Hawthorne's boots, size 9, hobnailed, carry traces of the same compound. He stepped back, surveying the tableau. The beeswax revolver, the misaligned suicide note, the child's voice, the vermilion fingerprint, the key that opened nothing. "Mes amis," he said, voice soft as falling ash, "this is no suicide. This is a performance, and the curtain has only just risen." Chapter 2. The Five Shadows. The library of Blackthorn Manor smelled of beeswax, old leather, and the faint metallic trace of fear. 5 people sat beneath the gaze of ancestral portraits, whose eyes seemed to follow every twitch. A single green-shaded lamp cast pools of light onto the bridge table, where cards lay abandoned mid-trick, hearts led, spades trumped, diamonds bleeding. Hercule Poirot stood at the hearth, small and immaculate, hands clasped behind his back. Inspector Japp leaned against the doorframe, notebook open, pencil poised. The silence stretched until it snapped. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, voice soft as velvet, yet sharp as a stiletto. "We are all players in a dangerous game. Lord Pembroke is dead. The room was locked. The gun was in his hand. Yet the little grey cells, they whisper, impossible. Therefore, one of you, or more than one, has constructed a lie so exquisite it rivals the Gordian knot. I, Hercule Poirot, shall untie it." He turned, green eyes glittering. "But first, we must meet the shadows." Mrs. Agatha Pembroke sat ramrod straight in a high-backed chair, pearls luminous against black velvet. 42, yet grief had not softened her. It had calcified. Her hands, gloveless now, bore the faint scars of rose thorns, except where a diamond, the size of a hazel, glittered on her left ring finger. "Tell me again, madame," Poirot said, "about the roses." "I was restless," she replied, voice clipped as winter air. "Archibald had been difficult. He accused me of extravagance. I went to the conservatory at 2:45. The Madame Caroline Testu were infested with aphids. I pruned them by lantern light. At 7 minutes past 3 I heard the shot." Poirot inclined his head. "And your slippers?" "In the hall cupboard. Muddy. I changed them." Japp grunted. "We'll check." Poirot's gaze drifted to her left hand. The diamond had a flaw, a feather inclusion, visible only at an angle. He made a mental note. The mirror crack aligned with a left-handed throw. Colonel Reginald Hawthorne stood by the window, staring into the fog as though it were a trench line. 60. Ramrod posture, moustache waxed to bayonet points. His dress uniform, faded scarlet, bore the ribbons of Ypres, Passchendaele, the Somme. "Pembroke and I go back to Sandhurst," he barked. "He made munitions. I used them. His shells killed my men, duds that exploded in the breach. After the war, he bought this pile with blood money. I borrowed 40,000 at White's to keep up. He refused to honour the debt, said I was a relic." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You were playing bridge at 2:55? The shot was at 3:07. Where were you at 3? "Fetching brandy. The decanter in the study was empty. I went to the cellar." "Alone?" Hawthorne's jaw worked. "Yes." Poirot noted the mud on the colonel's boots, fresh, hobnailed, size 9. And on the left sole, a smear of putty still tacky. Dr. Evelyn Sinclair sat apart, medical bag at her feet like a faithful dog. 35. Auburn hair pinned severely, eyes the colour of storm glass. Her hands were steady as she opened the bag, revealing the empty digitalis vial. "His lordship's heart was failing," she said, "arrhythmia. I prescribed digitalis, foxglove extract, 1 tablet thrice daily. Yesterday, I refilled the prescription, 100 tablets. The vial is empty." Poirot lifted it to the light. "Yet the autopsy, conducted by Dr. Spilsbury at my request, found no digitalis in the bloodstream. Curious, n'est-ce pas? A man takes his medicine faithfully, yet dies without it in his veins. Sinclair's fingers tightened. Perhaps he flushed them. Despair. Or perhaps... Poirot murmured, someone else flushed them. To create the illusion of suicide. He noticed her left hand, gloveless, a faint scar across the knuckles, and on the cuff of her white coat, a smudge of vermilion oil paint. Miss Lavinia Blackwood, 28, ash blonde, eyes like chipped flint, sat at the secretaire, fingers poised over a Remington typewriter. Her dress was severe navy, relieved only by a cameo brooch at the throat. "I was transcribing his lordship's memoirs," she said, voice soft as falling ash. "He dictated until 2:30. Then he dismissed me. I went to my room, 3rd floor, east wing. I heard nothing until the shot." Poirot's gaze flicked to the typewriter. The G key was misaligned, crossbar too high. He lifted the ribbon, fresh, yet the suicide note's G was perfect. "And this machine?" he asked. "His lordship's personal Underwood. I never use it." Poirot opened the drawer. Inside, a photograph. A child, aged 8, dark curls, solemn eyes. On the back, Lavinia Ostend, 1917. He closed the drawer. "You have been with his lordship 11 years, mademoiselle?" "Since I was 17. Mr. Felix Marlowe lounged against the mantel, cigarette holder dangling. Suit the colour of absinthe. 32, sleek as a seal, eyes like wet coal. "Archie and I were pals," he drawled. "I sold him a Vermeer, girl with a pearl earring copy, but a damn fine one. He paid 50,000. Then he found out it was a fake. Threatened to ruin me. I had photographs. Insurance, you understand." Poirot's eyebrow arched. "Photographs of?" Marlowe smiled thinly. His lordship was not always discreet. A certain Belgian lady, a child, you get the picture. Poirot opened Marlowe's briefcase. Inside, a spool of monofilament fishing line, a tube of vermilion oil paint, and a Webley Macar 4 cleaning kit, beeswax included. And at 3 a.m., Poirot asked, "Lavatory, nerves, brandy doesn't agree with me." Poirot noted the plumbing gurgle, logged by the butler at 3:04, and on Marlowe's left cuff, a faint scratch, consistent with the transom window's jagged pane. Chapter 3. The mirror's lie dawn bled grey through the study's French windows. Poirot stood before the cracked ormolu mirror, tape measure in hand, eyes narrowed to slits of emerald. The fracture radiated from a central point like a starburst frozen mid-explosion. He aligned the silk tape, 1.73 meters from the floor, precisely the height of the transom's broken pane. "Regardez," he murmured to Jap. "The crack is concave toward the room. Something struck the mirror from within. Yet the glass is intact on the outer face. Impossible, unless—" He traced the monofilament line still looped through the putty repair. It ran from the transom, across the ceiling rose, down the wall behind the mirror, and terminated at a brass curtain ring now dangling innocently beside the fireplace. "Someone stood outside," Poirot continued, "pulled the trigger via this line, then reeled the Webley inside. But the mirror, it reflected the terrace. The killer saw their own face at the moment of murder. A moment of vanity, n'est-ce pas?" They stepped onto the flagstones. Rain had softened the gravel, yet one set of prints remained. Size 9, hobnailed, leading from the rose bed to the transom. The putty was smeared with vermilion pigment, Marlowe's signature. Poirot knelt, scraped a sample into an envelope. Inside, the mirror's back revealed a second anomaly. A thumbprint in vermilion, left hand. The ridge pattern matched the smudge on Pembroke's hidden palm. Poirot's mind raced. The corpse touched the mirror post-mortem. Why? He examined the Webley again. The beeswax was not polish. It was moulding wax, used by sculptors. Beneath the barrel, a faint impression, a child's tooth, the phonograph's child's voice, Lavinia's recording, the tooth, extracted at 8, kept as a memento. Poirot rewound the Elgar record. Beneath the label, a second groove spiraled inward. He dropped the needle. Static, then a man's voice, Pembroke's, slurred with brandy. The game is up. The Vermeer is fake. The child is mine. Forgive. The word cut off as though a hand clamped the speaker. Japp whistled. Blackmail? Or confession, Poirot said. But the suicide note says, "Forgive me," in typed letters. This is spoken. 2 messages, 2 authors. He lifted the record. The center label was glued crookedly, recently. Beneath, a wax impression of the Webleys' grip. Someone pressed the hot barrel into the label to create a mold. Poirot followed the pigment. It led to Marlowe's room. A canvas half-finished, girl with a pearl earring, vermilion ground visible. The fishing line spool, 100 yards, 6 lb test, matched the transom fragment. In the wastebasket, a torn photograph corner, Pembroke and a woman, Belgian stamp on the back. Marlowe, summoned, lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. I was in the lavatory at 3. Asked the pipes. Poirot smiled thinly. The pipes gurgled at 3:04. The shot was at 3:07. You had 3 minutes to return, enough for a man who knows the servant's stairs. He produced the vermilion thumbprint. Your pigment, monsieur. On the mirror, on the corpse, on the putty. You repaired the window after the murder, non? Marlowe's facade cracked. I found the line. Thought it was Pembroke's fishing gear. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Then why is the knot a double fisherman's bend? A sailor's knot. You, monsieur, were in the Navy. 1916 torpedoed off Jutland. You know knots. Chapter 4. The poisoned decanter. The decanter stood on the study's sideboard. Baccarat crystal, half full of amber liquid. Poirot lifted it to the light. A faint sediment swirled. Cyanide crystals, undissolved. Amandes amères, he said, enough to kill a regiment. Yet the fin autopsy, Spilsbury's preliminary, found no cyanide in the stomach. Only brandy. Curious. Dr. Sinclair, pale, opened her bag. The digitalis vial, empty. I refilled it yesterday. 100 tablets. He took one at dinner. 99 should remain. Poirot counted the sediment in the decanter. 98 crystals. 1 tablet dissolved. The 99th, where? He poured a thimbleful into a glass, tasted. 1834 Armagnac, superb. But the aftertaste, foxglove. Digitalis dissolved in brandy masks the bitterness. He examined the decanter's stopper. Beeswax seal, broken. Inside the wax, a fingerprint, left index. Sinclair's hands trembled. I checked his pulse at 2:30. He was alive. Poirot's gaze flicked to her coat cuff. Vermilion paint, now joined by a faint green stain. Absinthe? No, chartreuse, used to dissolve digitalis for injection. He opened the dumbwaiter. Dust undisturbed, except 1 fingerprint in the grime. Left thumb, Sinclair's. Outside, the rose bed was a massacre of severed blooms. Mrs. Pembroke's pruning shears lay abandoned, blades crusted with blood. Poirot scraped a sample, Pembroke's type, O positive. Yet the slippers in the hall cupboard were dry. Madame Prunes at 3 a.m. in November, Poirot mused. In silk slippers? Non. She was here in the study after the shot. He found a single rose petal inside the French window, Madame Caroline Testu. Petals edged black, frostbite. It had been outside, then brought in. On the petal, a smear of digitalis residue. Back in the study, Poirot examined the suicide note again. The G was perfect, yet Lavinia's Remington had a faulty G. He opened Pembroke's Underwood. The ribbon was new, installed yesterday. He typed, "The game is up." The G matched the note, but the pressure was lighter. A different typist. Beneath the space bar, a single vermilion fingerprint, Marlowe's. Chapter 5. The Will in the Clock. Hercule Poirot stood before the tall case clock, its walnut case carved with hunting scenes. Stags, hounds, a lord with a raised musket. The hands were frozen at 3 haircut, yet the pendulum hung motionless. He opened the glass door. Inside, the weights were missing, 1 brass, 1 lead. In their place, a rolled vellum cylinder sealed with black wax. "Regardez," he whispered to Jap. "Time does not stop. It is stopped." He broke the seal. The document unrolled. A will, dated yesterday, 6th November 1930. Ink still crisp. Beneficiary, the Belgian Orphans Relief Fund, providing $200,000. Executor, Hercule Poirot. Jap exhaled. Blimey, the old will, favouring the widow, is missing. This one disinherits everyone. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Précisément, but observe the signature. The P in Pembroke loops left-handed. Yet his lordship wrote with his right. Someone forged this, beautifully. Poirot wound the clock with a brass key found in the pendulum bob. The gears protested, then caught. The hands jerked forward, 301, 302, then 13 chimes rang out, impossible and discordant. The final strike cracked the bell. "Trays," Poirot murmured. "A number of ill omen, and the mechanism tampered. The escapement has been filed. Someone wished the clock to advance at 2:55, then stop at 3 gas, to create the illusion of time of death." He opened the back panel. Inside, a second cylinder, smaller, wrapped in oilskin. A child's drawing, crayon, 1917. A house, a son, a stick-figure girl, labelled Lavinia. On the reverse, Daddy's secret, don't tell Mummy. Poirot's breath caught. The child on the phonograph, the tooth in the wax, the Vermeer bought in Zurich to fund a Swiss school. Mon Dieu, Lavinia Blackwood is his daughter. Outside, the rose bed had yielded more. Beneath the Madame Caroline Testu, a boot print, size 9, hobnailed, left sole smeared with putty. Poirot scraped it into an envelope. In the boot room, Colonel Hawthorne's riding boots, cleaned, but the left sole bore a fresh repair. Putty, still soft, mixed with vermilion flecks. Hawthorne, summoned, blustered. "Gardener's work. I lent the boots yesterday." Poirot smiled thinly. "The gardener wears size 7, and the putty is artist's quality from Mr. Marlowe's studio. You repaired the transom window, Colonel, at 3:08, after the shot, to hide the fishing line." Hawthorne's moustache twitched. "Preposterous!" Poirot produced the child's drawing. "You knew of the illegitimate daughter. Pembroke's war profits funded her education. You borrowed $40,000 to silence gossip at White's. He refused to pay. You had motive and opportunity." Back in the study, Poirot examined the new will under a magnifying lens. The ink, iron gall, standard for legal documents, but the nib pressure varied. The forger wrote with a left hand, then switched to right to mimic Pembroke's style. A single drop of ink had spattered onto the blotter, vermilion tinted. Marlowe's pigment, mixed to thin the ink. He opened Pembroke's desk drawer. The old will, favouring Agatha, was gone. In its place, a single sheet typed on the underwood. "If I die, blame no one." The game is up. The G was perfect, but the paper, watermarked 1929. The suicide note was on 1930 stock. 2 typewriters, Poirot said. 2 wills, 2 lies. The real will is hidden where the clock cannot see. He tapped the clock's base. Hollow. A panel slid aside. Inside, the original will, dated 1928, leaving everything to Agatha, but with a codicil. If Pembroke died by violence, the estate reverted to Lavinia. Chapter 6. The Child in the Portrait. The West Wing studio smelled of turpentine, linseed, and secrets. Canvases leaned like conspirators. Half-finished copies of Vermeer, Rembrandt, a luminous girl, with a pearl earring glowing under a dust sheet. Hercule Poirot stood before an easel, ultraviolet lamp in hand. The paintings, ground layer fluoresced, vermilion lead, Marlowe's signature pigment, laid in 1928. "Regardez," he said to Jap, "the Vermeer is not a copy. It is a Polondit, a forgery commissioned by Pembroke himself to launder war profits, £50,000 paid in Zurich. But the child in the portrait—" He lifted a corner of the canvas. Beneath the pearl earring, a faint outline, a second face, painted over. Lavinia, aged 8. He read aloud, "Archibald paid for the Swiss school. The Vermeer was collateral. If he dies, the painting reverts to you." The final letter, dated 1925, "He has married. The English rose she must never know." Jap scratched his head. So Lavinia Blackwood is the love child, and the Vermeer, worth a fortune, was her dowry. Poirot nodded. "But Pembroke forged a new will yesterday, disinheriting her. Why? Because the painting was fake. Marlowe switched it. Pembroke discovered the fraud. Blackmail ensued." He lifted a photograph from the box. Pembroke, younger, arm around a dark-haired woman, Marie Blackwood, Belgian refugee. On the back, "For my daughter. Never forget Poirot returned to the study. The Webley's barrel, still waxy." He heated a scalpel over a spirit lamp, peeled the beeswax. Embedded within, a milk tooth, tiny, perfect. He compared it to the child's drawing from the clock. The tooth matched the gap in the stick-figure smile. "Lavinia lost this tooth in 1917, he said. "Pembroke kept it. Pressed it into hot wax to create a mould for the phonograph label, to prove paternity. But why embed it in the gun?" He examined the phonograph again. The second groove, Pembroke's slurred confession, ended abruptly. Beneath the label, a wax impression of the tooth, pressed post-mortem. Someone used the hot barrel to seal the record after the shot. "Mon Dieu!" The child's voice was bait. The tooth was proof. The gun was the seal. Lavinia Blackwood was summoned. She entered the studio, pale, cameo brooch trembling at her throat. Poirot held up the photograph. "Mademoiselle, your mother was Marie Blackwood. Your father paid for your education. The Vermeer was your inheritance. But he discovered the forgery. He planned to expose Marlowe and cut you from the will." Lavinia's eyes filled. "He summoned me yesterday. Said he'd changed everything. That I was to leave at dawn. I typed the new will, left-handed to mimic his style. But I couldn't. I burned the old one in the grate. The scrap, Ypres, was from his war memoirs." Poirot's voice softened. "And the child's voice on the phonograph?" "My recording. Aged 8. He kept it in his desk. I played it at 3:06, to summon him, to beg, but he was already—" Her voice broke. Poirot produced the tooth. "You pressed this into the wax after the shot. To leave a message. Daddy, don't leave me." Chapter 7. The Doctor's Round. Dr. Evelyn Sinclair's surgery log lay open on the study desk like a dissected corpse. Poirot ran a gloved finger down the column. 2:45 a.m. Mrs. A. Pembroke, hysteria, Blackthorn Manor, ink still glossy. He snapped the book shut. "Madame la Doctoress," he said, turning to Sinclair. "You made a house call at 2:45. Yet Mrs. Pembroke was pruning roses at 3. Hysteria does not wait." Sinclair's face was chalk. "She telephoned. Said his lordship was agitated. I came at once." Poirot lifted her medical bag. Inside, a hypodermic case, empty. A left-handed surgical glove, vermilion paint on the cuff. He held it to the light. "You injected something, no? digitalis, or air. He produced a police inventory. Webley M. Case 4, serial 44719, stolen from Dr. Sinclair's clinic, 14th of May 1930, reported by her assistant. She paled. I kept it for protection, country practice. It vanished. Poirot opened the Webley from the crime scene. Serial filed off, but partial etchings remained. 44, 919. He aligned it under a lens, match. 6 months ago, he said. You reported the theft after purchasing fishing line from Harrods. 100 yards, 6 lb test, same as the transom. You planned this, Dr. S. Sinclair's voice cracked. I treated him for years. He was difficult. Demanded morphine, threatened to ruin me when I refused. Poirot found a second vial in her bag. Potassium cyanide, half full. For euthanasia, peut-être? Yet the decanter held dissolved digitalis. You poisoned the brandy, then removed the tablets to fake suicide. He held the left-handed glove against the mirror crack. The diamond-shaped tear in the leather aligned with the spiderweb fracture. You threw your ringed hand at the glass, in rage or panic. The diamond, Mrs. Pembroke's, left its mark. Sinclair shook her head. I was in the hall when the shot... Poirot produced a servant's testimony, signed, heard Dr. Sinclair arguing with his lordship at 2:58. You'll pay for Ypres, she said. Ypres, Jap echoed. Sinclair's eyes blazed. My brother died at Ypres. Pembroke's shells. Duds. I found the contract proofs in his desk. He profited while boys bled. Poirot opened the desk drawer. Inside, a folder. Munitions contract 1917. Pembroke and Sons. Margin notes in Sinclair's hand. Blood money. Poirot returned to the corpse. Now on a trestle table, sheet pulled back. He parted Pembroke's hair. A pinprick at the scalp base, left side. Bruising consistent with a 23-gauge needle. Air embolism, he said. Injected post-mortem to mimic gunshot trajectory. The real bullet entered lower right temple. You fired from the terrace, reeled the gun in, then staged the head wound. He lifted the Webley. The barrel, left-handed grip marks in beeswax. Sinclair's hand size. You wore the glove to avoid burns. The vermilion came from Marlowe's studio. Your lover. Sinclair laughed bitterly. Felix? He forged the Vermeer. I forged the will. We all had. Pieces. Chapter 8. The Widow's Roses. The conservatory glowed under a single hurricane lamp. Madame Caroline Testout's roses bled crimson onto the flagstones, severed necks drooping like guillotined aristocrats. Mrs. Agatha Pembroke stood among them, midnight blue velvet streaked with green sap, pruning shears open in her gloved hand. The blades glinted, blood-crusted. Poirot entered without sound, cane silent on the tiles. Madame, you prune with surgical precision, yet the hour is peculiar, and the blood, Agatha did not flinch. Rose thorns, they tear. Poirot lifted the shears with a handkerchief. The blood was dry, flaking. Type O positive, his lordship's, but observe, he scraped a flake onto glass. Layered. First arterial spray, then smear. You held these after the shot, not before. In the hall, the cupboard yielded the slippers, dry, immaculate, soles unscuffed. Poirot turned them to the light. Inside the left, a single rose petal, frost-blackened, pressed flat. You claim to have walked the gravel path at 3, yet the dew is absent. The frostbite on the petal proves it was cut indoors, then placed here. A prop, madame, like the key, like the beeswax. Agatha's diamond flashed as she folded her arms. I heard the shot from the garden. Poirot produced a gardener's log. Mrs. P. took shears at 2:30, returned 3:15. 15 minutes unaccounted. He opened the shears pivot screw, a strand of monofilament, cut flush. You held the fishing line, no? Guided the gun's trajectory from the terrace. Your diamond cracked the mirror when the recoil snapped the line. Poirot returned to the study safe, now open, combination cracked by Jap. Inside, the real original will, ink still tacky. Dated 5th of November, 11:45 p.m., leaving everything to Agatha, but void if death by violence. A second sheet, torn from the same pad, lay in her glove box. If I die, the Belgian bastard gets nothing. Ink matched the safe document, wet, smudged by a left thumb. He held the torn scrap beside the suicide note. Fibres aligned. You tore this from the will, typed the note, then burned the evidence, but the ink bled through the glove leather, vermilion-tinted from Marlowe's studio. Agatha's voice was ice. Archibald changed his mind. The girl was a mistake. He wanted her gone. Poirot's eyes narrowed. So you pruned the roses to establish time of death. You fired the shot, left-handed, via the mirror's reflection. You staged the digitalis. You forged the charity will to deflect suspicion. But the slippers betray you. Under ultraviolet, the shears revealed more. Gunpowder residue on the inner blade, transferred when Agatha gripped the Webley's barrel to reel it in. A single strand of her hair, dyed auburn at the roots, caught in the pivot. DNA would confirm, but the little grey cells needed no lab. Poirot knelt by the rosebed. Beneath the roots, a brass curtain ring snapped, the fishing line's anchor. Nearby, a silk handkerchief, AP monogram soaked in brandy and digitalis. You wiped the decanter, then planted the petal, but the handkerchief drank the poison. Agatha's composure fractured. He was leaving me, for her, the Belgian whore's brat. Poirot stood. Love and money, madame. Twin serpents, you strangled both. Chapter 9. The reenactment. The study was a stage. Poirot had arranged the players exactly as the bridge scores demanded. Agatha north, Hawthorne south, Sinclair east, Lavinia west, Marlowe dummy by the mantel. The Webley lay on the blotter, barrel gleaming with fresh beeswax. The monofilament line, restrung, ran from transom to curtain ring to Poirot's gloved hand. "Mes amis," he announced, "we replay the dangerous game. At 2:55 you sat here. At 3:02 the record begins. At 3:06 the child pleads. At 3:07, bang, curtain." He cranked the gramophone. Nimrod filled the room. Poirot pointed. "Mrs. Pembroke, north, you rose at 2:57 to prune roses. Yet the shears were taken at 2:30. You were on the terrace, holding the line." Agatha's diamond flashed. "Prove it." Poirot tugged the monofilament. The Webley jerked across the blotter, barrel rising to temple height, left side. "Your left hand, madame. The mirror showed you the angle." Next, Hawthorne. "You fetched brandy at 2:58, but the cellar door was bolted. You repaired the transom at 3:08. Putty on your boot." Hawthorne bristled. "Gardener's work." "Size 7 gardener, size 9 boot," Poirot corrected. Sinclair. "You injected air at 2:59 post-mortem to mimic trajectory. The pinprick, the glove, the vermilion cuff." Lavinia. "You played the child's voice at 3:06, your own recording, to summon him, but he was already dead." Marlowe. "You typed the suicide note, forged the will, supplied line and pigment. At 3:04, you flushed the lavatory alibi." Poirot restarted the record. At 3:02, Nimrod. At 3:06, Lavinia's voice, "Daddy, don't leave me." At 3:07, he yanked the line. The Webley clicked, unloaded, but the motion perfect. 5 parts, he said. Agatha fires, Hawthorne repairs, Sinclair poisons, Lavinia distracts, Marlowe forges, a perfect quintet. But the conductor, he stopped the record. Silence. The conductor was Pembroke. He wrote the score. The new will, charity, was genuine. He wanted to disinherit you all. He staged the locked room to frame you, then planned to vanish. Jap gaped. But the body? Poirot lifted the sheet from the trestle. The corpse's face, wax, moulded over a tailor's dummy. The skull, plaster. The blood pig drained from the kitchen. Poirot peeled the wax scalp. Beneath, a phonograph cylinder, tiny, embedded in the plaster. He played it on a pocket machine. Pembroke's voice alive. "If you hear this, I am gone. The diamonds, 200,000 dollars, are in the clock. The will is real. Checkmate, my greedy heirs." The room erupted. Agatha lunged for the clock. Hawthorne blocked her. Sinclair screamed. Lavinia wept. Marlowe bolted. Japp tackled him. Poirot opened the clock base. Inside, a leather pouch, diamonds glittering like frozen tears, and a train ticket. Dover to Ostend, 6:15 a.m. "He used the dumbwaiter," Poirot said. "Breathed through a garden hose to the rosebed. Escaped while you rehearsed your alibis. The shot, blank cartridge fired by timer. The blood pig pumped via syringe." Chapter 10. The Dangerous Game. The rosebed was a battlefield of trampled frost. Poirot knelt, ultraviolet lamp sweeping. Bare footprints, size 10 narrow arch, led from the French window to the gravel path, then vanished. Beside them, a garden hose, one end buried in the soil, the other cut clean. A single diamond, flawless, blood-warm, lay in the mud. "Regardez," Poirot whispered to Japp. "Lord Pembroke did not die. He escaped. The locked room was his masterpiece. The corpse, tailor's dummy, wax head, pig's blood. The gunshot, blank timed by phonograph. The suicide note, distraction. He played you all like pawns." They pried open the dumbwaiter shaft. Inside, rope burns on the pulley, a brass snorkel fashioned from a hunting horn. The wine cellar below reeked of brandy and fear. A trapdoor to the old smuggler's tunnel, unlocked. On the floor, a discarded dinner jacket, Pembroke's monogrammed. In the pocket, a passport, Belgian false name, Armand Poirier, and a chess piece, white king carved from ivory. Poirot turned the king, the base unscrewed. Inside, a map, Dover Docks, berth 7, SS Ostend Queen, 6:15 a.m. "He breathed through the hose," Poirot said, "crawled the tunnel, emerged in the boathouse. The diamonds, sewn into the jacket lining, funded his new life. The charity will was genuine. He wanted to punish his heirs. The murder framed them all." Upstairs, the five sat chained to their chairs, Japp's cuffs gleaming. Poirot laid the evidence like cards. Agatha, fishing line in her glove box, blood on shears. Hawthorne, putty on boot, window repair, Sinclair. Stolen Webley, air embolism needle mark. Lavinia, child's recording, tooth and wax. Marlowe, forged Vermeer, typed note, vermilion everywhere. "Each of you acted," Poirot said, "believing murder real. You covered for each other, inadvertently. Pembroke's genius. He turned greed into mutual alibi. The clock struck 13 to signal his escape. The barometer fell after the shot. Air pressure from the dumbwaiter." Agatha laughed hysterically. "He played us for fools." Poirot's eyes were cold. "Oui, but the game is not over." Dawn broke over the channel. Poirot stood on Dover Pier, fog thinning. The SS Ostend Queen loomed, gangway down. A man in a camel hair coat, Pembroke, bearded, limping, handed diamonds to a steward. Poirot stepped forward. "Monsieur Poirier, or should I say Lord Pembroke, the White King." "Surrenders." Pembroke turned, eyes twinkling. "Poirot! You always were a spoilsport." Behind him, Belgian police, summoned by wireless. Pembroke raised his hands. The diamonds spilled like hail. Back at Blackthorn, Poirot addressed the heirs. His lordship confessed. The corpse was built in the cellar over weeks. The phonograph timer, his invention. He mailed the charity will to me before the murder. He wanted you ruined. But justice, mes amis, is colorblind. The real will, 1928, favoring Agatha with the violence clause, was upheld. Lavinia inherited the Vermeer genuine, hidden in the clock. The forgers, poisoners, and conspirators faced lesser charges, accessory after the fact to fraud.